Greetings, I'm Pastor Karl Stuckenberg. I'm the lead pastor here at St. Andrews by the Sea United Methodist Church. And the purpose of this video is to share some information and to update you on what is happening within our United Methodist denomination and what effect, if any, those actions are going to have on us here at St. Andrews by the Sea. If you've read the newspapers in the last month, you probably noticed our local papers had a couple of articles about a split that is happening within the United Methodist denomination. Now, while both of these articles contained information, they weren't able to tell the whole story about the pending split, and some of the information was not accurate. We've actually been in this debate in our United Methodist Church and pending split for the last 5 years. And its surrounding language in our Book of Discipline as it relates to marriage and ordination and the full inclusion of people in our churches who are within the LGBTQ+ community. But before we even talk about the details, I want to say that for us as United Methodist Christians, being a disciple, a follower of Jesus, is at the heart of everything that we do. Everyone who becomes a United Methodist Church member makes the same vow on a Sunday morning. Do you confess Jesus Christ as your Savior? Put your whole trust in His grace. Promise to serve Him as your Lord in union with the church which Christ has opened to people of all ages, nations, and races. And according to you, to the grace given to you, will you remain faithful members of Christ's holy church and serve as Christ's representatives in the world. Now, though we may disagree on some issues, the heart of what we do is to live our lives following the model of Jesus, loving God and loving our neighbors as ourselves. I've been an ordained United Methodist pastor for 27 years. I've been in local church ministry for 33 years, and I have been a United Methodist my entire life. And every church that I have served here in our CalPAC conference has been a place where I have shared what it means to become followers of Jesus. Or as we say here at St. Andrews by the Sea, we seek to connect, grow, and serve. That's where the heart of St. Andrews by the Sea United Methodist Church is, and it's where my heart as a United Methodist pastor is as well. So here's the overview of what we'll talk about today. First, I want to highlight a couple of definitions. There is a definition glossary attached with this video, but I want to highlight a couple of them. Second, I want to give you a summary of what's led up to the splintering within our denomination. And then third, I want to let you know what it means and what it doesn't mean for St. Andrews by the Sea. All right, well, let's start with some exciting definitions of United Methodist terms. In the United Methodist Church, we love words, lots of words, and we have acronyms. We love acronyms, UMCOR, GBHEM, UMYF, and on and on. And we have lots of United Methodist lingo, words like conferencing or conferences, connectionalism, the quadrilateral. None of those are easy to say. And if you're new to the United Methodist Church, or even if you've been a lifelong United Methodist, you might not know what they all mean. So before I begin, I want to do some quick definitions so that we are all on the same page in this conversation. The first is the Book of Discipline. And this book outlines our general rules, structures, and procedures of the United Methodist Church. And these rules, structures, procedures apply to the entire denomination, all the way down to the local church, like us here at St. Andrews. Now, essentially, it's our bylaws and our operating instructions. And it's what is at the center of this split or disagreement is about changing wording in this Book of Discipline. And changes and amendments are made every 4 years when we have a general conference gathering of both clergy and leaders that are elected delegates to represent. The second term that I want to highlight is disaffiliation. Now, this means separation from the United Methodist Church. It's a term we use when the members of a local United Methodist Church no longer want to be part of our United Methodist denomination. Now, though it's rare, it does happen. And when it does, the issue of property ownership always comes up. And that leads me to our third definition: property held in trust. The concept of being held in trust, found in paragraph 2501 of our Book of Discipline, and now you know what that is, and this also comes from the wishes of our founder, John Wesley, all the way back in the 18th century when the Methodist movement was started. Essentially, it says that all United Methodist churches and properties are held in trust by the annual conference. This means that local church buildings and property are not owned by the members of a local church. They are owned by the United Methodist Church as a whole, so that they will be used for the work and ministry of the United Methodist Church. Being held in trust honors the intentions of those who originally built these buildings and structures in order to bring a United Methodist presence into a local community. Property held in trust is why one of the major issues surrounding the United Methodist split is centered around property. Because if a church chooses to disaffiliate, they can do so, but they do not own the church property and thus would either have to buy it from the United Methodist Church or move to a new location. So, what is this all about? What is this split in the United Methodist denomination? How did it happen? Why is the United Methodist Church splitting? And why are some churches choosing to disaffiliate? Well, now comes the tricky part in this presentation, trying to simplify what is a very complex disagreement that's been debated for over 50 years in our denomination and in most mainline denominations. Now, the basic situation is this. In May of 2023, a more theologically conservative group of clergy and church leaders created a new denomination called the Global Methodist Church. Now, the United Methodist Church has about 30,000 churches in the United States. But since 2019, about 20% of those congregations, little over 6,000, have disaffiliated from the United Methodist Church. Many have now ultimately joined the Global Methodist Church. In our California Pacific Annual Conference, the number is much lower. We have 350 United Methodist churches here from San Luis Obispo all the way down to the Southern California border, Hawaii, Guam, and Saipan. But in our conference, it's estimated that about 20 churches will disaffiliate. That's only about 5% of all of our churches in the conference. Now, schisms or splits in the Methodist tradition is not new. In fact, I tried to find a diagram that would show the splits that have happened in our denomination since its creation in 1784. And, well, this is what I found. As you can see, it's far too small to even take a close look at. Now, Methodists have disagreed, split, and reformed on many things: church governance, doctrine, worship styles, social issues, justice issues. Well, after this split, there will still be the United Methodist Church that we are part of, and there is a new denomination, the Global Methodist Church. Now, what is this split all about? Well, believe it or not, it goes all the way back to 1972. That was the year that two statements were added to our Book of Discipline. The first was an addition to our social principles in a statement on human sexuality that read, "Homosexual persons, no less than heterosexual persons, are individuals of sacred worth." And thus the first United Methodist debate about homosexuality took place at that general conference. And though those words were adopted, another group in the church also added this statement, that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. And every general conference since then, we have gone back and forth, changing language, revising it, disagreeing, and voting. The debate that spawned the current split was specifically over language around two issues: ordination of clergy and clergy performing same-sex marriages. Paragraph 304.3 states that self-avowed practicing homosexuals are not to be certified as candidates, ordained as ministers, or appointed to serve in the United Methodist Church. And paragraph 259.6 states that ceremonies that celebrate homosexual unions shall not be conducted by our ministers and shall not be conducted in our churches. Now, since I've been ordained, our annual conference and other more theologically liberal annual conferences would submit legislation to the General Conference every year to remove this restrictive language around homosexuality. And each time a vote was taken in the United States, it has moved us closer and closer to removing that language, as many other mainline denominations have done. And truthfully, what was predicted to happen at the 2016 General Conference was that the language would finally be removed. In the meantime, bishops in the Western jurisdiction, which include our annual conference, who are more inclusive theologically, have supported LGBTQ+ rights, and they have recognized same-sex marriages. We have ordained LGBTQ+ pastors and elected 2 bishops who are in same-sex marriages. So, what happened at General Conference 2016? Well, there was debate over removing the exclusive language, as there always was, from the Book of Discipline. But in this General Conference, they could not even pass an agreement to agree to disagree theologically. And so a special General Conference was set for spring of 2019 to deal solely with the UMC stance on full inclusion. As talk of splitting was in the air, groups began to work before that conference to find a way to remain united, even if we disagreed. And they came up with a plan. Well, they came up with several plans, but the most prominent plan was the One Church plan. What it did was it would remove the restrictive language, homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. That would be removed with respect to marriage, membership, ordination, and all other areas of the church. However, annual conferences and local churches and clergy could exercise their own theological conscience with respect to same-sex marriage and ordination of openly homosexual persons. If they chose to ordain and marry, it would be okay. If they chose not to ordain persons who were in openly homosexual relationships, that would also be allowed as well. But something totally different than all of that happened. A traditionalist plan was proposed that not only kept the exclusive language intact, but put extremely harsh penalties in place for those who ignored it. Now, mobilized with the central conferences outside of the United States who vote at our General Conference and tend to be more theologically conservative, they won a vote first to remove the One Church plan from even being considered and making the traditionalist plan the only plan that we would vote on. And in the end, when the vote was finally taken, it was 438 to 384. It won by 54 votes. Now, just for information purposes, if that vote had been taken amongst only U.S. United Methodists, it would have been 2-1 against the traditional plan. But either way, a split was now bound to happen. But the hope was that an attempt to mend fences one last time could take place at the 2020 General Conference in May of that year. Now, I don't know if you recall 2020, but there was no General Conference in May of 2020. There was nothing in May of 2020 because the pandemic landed and hit and put a stop to everything. And neither was there a 2022 General Conference, and there won't be another General Conference again until 2024, which is why the Global Methodist Church went ahead and created itself in May of this year. Now, hang with me here. I know this is a lot of information. I need to talk about one other thing. Like politics, United Methodist Polity has a lot of twists and turns in how we use the laws of our denomination. When the traditionalist plan was adopted, they also made a temporary addendum to the Book of Discipline that would allow churches to disaffiliate for reasons of conscience regarding a change in the requirements and provisions of the Book of Discipline related to the practice of homosexuality, and that issue only. Annual conferences would be allowed to set guidelines for disaffiliation. They must include the following: payment of unpaid apportionments and an extra 12 months of apportionments to the denomination. They had to cover all pension liabilities. They had to pay back any conference loans. And then each annual conference would decide on the guidelines for allowing a church to leave with its property. In our annual conference, because of the high value of California and Hawaii property, disaffiliating churches would be asked to pay 50% of the appraised value of that property. Now, this clause expires December 31st, 2023. Although nothing is ever for certain, but because most of the more theologically conservative congregations have left the denomination and disaffiliated and joined with the Global Methodist Church, it is expected that in 2024, the General Conference delegates will make the change to our Book of Discipline and remove the restrictive wording of the traditionalist plan, and continue to seek to share God's love with everyone as the church. Which leads us to the reason for this video. What does this mean for St. Andrews by the Sea United Methodist Church? As I mentioned, in our annual conference, only 5% of the local churches are planning to disaffiliate at this time. But I want to circle back to the beginning. Though we may disagree on some issues, the heart of what we do as United Methodist Christians is to live our lives following the model of Jesus, loving God and loving our neighbors as ourselves. Every church that I have served in this annual conference, including St. Andrews by the Sea, has been a church where all are welcome. Now, the people of those local churches have disagreed on a number of things, from food preferences to politics to what color we ought to paint the bathrooms. And yet on Sunday mornings, we gather together to worship God in the same space, even though we might disagree. And when we connect here at St. Andrews, we connect with each other and God. And when we grow together with one another in our faith and in our understanding of God. And when we serve side by side with all. So in answer to the question, what changes for St. Andrews by the Sea will happen with this split? Well, simply put, probably nothing, really. I mean, we will still be the United Methodist Church. We will stay here on the hilltop in San Clemente, landslide and all, and I will still be your appointed pastor here at the church. And we will continue to be followers of Jesus who seek to connect and to grow and to serve with all of God's children. However, I also understand if you have questions, because understanding the United Methodist Church can sometimes be about as easy as understanding the book of Revelation, a reference to our current sermon series if you're watching this in the future. If you have questions, if you want to know more, please feel free to reach out to me. You can send me an email at Pastor Karl, that's Karl with a K, pastorkarl.sabts@gmail.com. And I would be happy to set up a time to meet with you here at the church, meet you for lunch or coffee, or even come to your home if you would like. I am proud to be a United Methodist pastor, and I am honored to serve as your pastor here at St. Andrews by the Sea.